Thank you. You know, when you were here in March, I commented that sunshine is the best disinfectant and that this place needs to be fumigated. We've been working hard to do that over the last 7 months, but it hasn't been easy and our work continues. Mr. Schellenberger, when you last testified before our subcommittee, you responded to a question from Chairman Jordan when he asked about the Hunter Biden laptop story, and I'm going to quote what you said. You said, quote, "Now maybe the FBI agents who were going to Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook and to Twitter executives were warning about a hack and leak potentially involving Hunter Biden. Maybe those guys didn't have anything to do with the guys that had the laptop. We just don't know." Well, you know what? Now we do know. And we know after interviewing Laura Demlow, who at the time of the Hunter Biden laptop story was on the Foreign Influence Task Force, we have learned from her that she and others on that task force did in fact know about the laptop before the New York Post story broke, and they knew it was his. In other words, the work done in the years since the release of the Twitter files has continued to expose the extent of the censorship industrial complex. These discoveries show the importance of your testimony and the oversight work that has been done by this committee. What do you think this shows in terms of the complexity and scope of the censorship industrial complex? What I mean by that is, even though with the trove of information that you released over a year ago, or approximately a year ago, we're still filling in the gaps to understand the extent of what the federal government has engaged in terms of violating the First Amendment.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that it shows is that the censorship is in service of disinformation. It wasn't that they prevented the New York Post from publishing. It wasn't even that the tweet eventually did come back on Twitter, was eventually allowed. But the disinformation that was planted, that myself and all my family and friends believed, was that there was something fraudulent about the Hunter Biden laptop, which we now know was actually the Hunter Biden laptop. It's been verified now by all the major media and everybody else. But it created the perception that it was misinformation by the Russians. And of course, that conspiracy theory continues to be peddled today. So that's what it did. And that's how these guys at CTIL thought about it. That's how all of these operatives that are used to waging disinformation campaigns and psyops in foreign countries turned those tools against the American people.
And that's the critical point. They have been turned against the American people.
Absolutely.
What do you think about the fact that the FBI agents warning Twitter about a hack and leak were the same agents who knew that of the existence and legitimacy of that laptop? What do you think about those people?
It's shocking. Like you said, I was trying to only report on what we knew at the time, but obviously when that came out, it's absolutely shocking that you would have the FBI sitting on this information in 2019 and then seeding the idea that there would be a hack and leak coming. I mean, it wasn't just Aspen Institute, it was also Stanford came out, and they used that as a pretext to attack the Pentagon Papers principle upheld by the Supreme Court that when journalists like us are leaked information, we can publish it and we're protected by the First Amendment. We saw Stanford Institute attacking that precedent and saying journalists should no longer follow the Pentagon Papers principle. They should no longer report on information leaked to them. They should not do what Matt and I and Alex just did with publishing these files leaked to us by a patriotic whistleblower who knew absolutely that this was wrong, that it was a violation of the First Amendment, that it was a violation of it in the spirit and the letter. And that's the kind of, to see these institutions of the establishment argue against this great American tradition of journalism and the First Amendment, it's quite appalling.
It's shocking.
Shocking.
Ms. Subramania, here in the House, we are exposing the U.S. government censorship by proxy, which uses social media companies, academia, and private companies to circumvent the First Amendment. At the same time, we are watching with horror as liberal democracies in Europe and Canada are not even trying to hide their efforts to censor their citizens. We know where this is going, and without exposure and reform, we could be doomed to the same fate. In your opening statement, you discussed the impacts of the Online News Act and the other censorship efforts seen in European nations, and you issue a stern warning that I hope all Americans will take to heart. Could you describe the trends that you are seeing and specifically what tools or mechanisms of control these governments are trying to exert over free speech?
Thank you for that question. Some of the examples are from my testimony. So debanking is one obvious tool that the Canadian government, in a sense, has pioneered as far as Western liberal democracies are concerned. China has been doing that for years, but it's now come to the West. and they went after peaceful protesters and punished them, weaponized the financial system, weaponized the government against them to teach them a lesson. You can't do this ever again. And this sort of thing has a chilling effect on people's ability to express themselves freely. And that's certainly happened in Canada. And what's happening in Ireland, again, another country that I mentioned, what's happening in France, the EU directive on online speech. All of these things are just extremely problematic. And I want to say something here. What is under threat here is a core value of Western civilization.
That's right.
That is what is being undermined here. And that goes back to the Enlightenment. That is what we have to fight for. And the way you tackle misinformation, disinformation, all of these things which are bandied about loosely by people who want to censor you, the best solution to these things is more robust debate, and that goes back to the Enlightenment period, and that's what I want everybody to remember.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Taibbi, Mr. Schellenberger. Thank you for battling for all of us. Thank you for working so hard to protect our First Amendment rights. We really, really are terribly indebted to you, and you as well, Janine. Thank you.
Thank you.
The gentlelady yields back. Mr. Monnier, well said. The chair now recognizes the ranking member.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2017, as some of you may recall, one of Trump's first official actions as president was to issue the chaotic executive order barring any travel from 7 predominantly Muslim countries, effectively serving as a Muslim ban. He continued these attacks on immigrant communities throughout his presidency. And he has promised to strip immigrants, if elected again, of their benefits and work permits, execute the largest deportation effort in American history, strip immigrant children of American citizenship, even if they're born here, and reinstate and expand the Muslim ban. Ms. Troy, you were an advisor in the White House when the Muslim travel ban was implemented. Can you tell us, as a national security expert, what happened when that ban took place? Was there advice given before the president issued that?
Sure, there were numerous discussions, and just to clarify, during the travel ban time, I was at DHS. I was the lead intelligence officer on the travel ban, coordinating the entire community. There were significant discussions on intelligence assessments conducted. I will say that there were heated discussions and meetings where members of the Trump administration, loyalists who wanted to override community intelligence assessments to suit the countries that they wanted on the list. There was significant pushback. There was advice from career intelligence officers, senior intelligence officers like myself, about the threshold of these assessments. I will tell you that it went to the extent where there were senior officials Googling what they considered to be intelligence input and sending it to me to be included in official community coordinated intelligence assessments and saying that those were facts, which was appalling to me because that is not how the intelligence community, it's not how we operate. So there were numerous situations like that where that was the kind of dynamic that we faced on critical issues like this, which impact numerous matters of national security that I can't get into because they're classified, but those matters of national security when discussing certain countries and the impacts of the travel ban were serious, and they were raised.
So in the execution of that travel ban, can you explain to us or share with us the interagency actions in the immediate announcement of the travel ban? Was this something that had been worked through?
No.
How did that happen?
No, we were blindsided by when it was issued, especially at DHS. As you saw, it was horrible. There was chaos at the airports, which you saw. We did not have the proper time to figure out how we were going to implement this executive order. There was no coordination of how we would carry these things out, especially in the aftermath of it. I remember CBP agents sitting at airports and TSA, like everyone was mass confusion about what was happening. The leadership of the department was not consulted or given a heads up. That is kind of how that played out at the beginning.
And this is from a newly elected president who did not understand the levers of power that he had upon coming into office. I can only imagine in the next administration, should he be elected, what he would do understanding that. An individual who has a long history of racist controversies, who has xenophobia in his usage of what he has done. 1991 book by John O'Donnell in Trump's criticism of a black accountant. He says, "Black guys counting my money, I hate it. The only kind of people I want counting my money are short guys that wear yarmulkes every day. I think that the guy is lazy, and it's probably not his fault because laziness is a trait in blacks. It really is. I believe it's out of his control." And when questioned about it, he said, "The stuff O'Donnell said about me is probably true." This is an individual who, when he was in the White House, denied making the comment about shithole countries that people should go back to, although senators, US senators, present at the meeting said that it would happen. Ms. Troy, you signed a statement with over 130 national security experts that explained how Trump had routinely vilified immigrants in this country, which among other things makes him unfit to be the commander-in-chief. Many of us are offended when he demonizes individuals, immigrants from a moral and personal perspective. But what effect does it practically have on national security stability when Trump broadly demonizes immigrant groups in this country?
Well, I am the daughter of immigrants. My mom is a Mexican immigrant, and I am of Mexican descent. And I will say,
which the president said were rapists, right?
Correct. I remember that. And I will say that it leads to anti-immigrant sentiment. It leads to attacks on immigrants. It leads to situations like when they repeat the Great Replacement narratives, it leads to mass shootings like the one in El Paso at the Walmart where my aunt was in, when the shooter talked about the Hispanic invasion of Texas. It leads to situations like that. It leads to the violence and hate that you are continuing to see and the divisiveness of this country. I will tell you that it also speaks to another scenario that I remember clearly was when Trump kept calling it the China virus, and he did it on purpose, and it was the attacks on Asian people in this country increased during the pandemic. That is one thing that I know was recognized internally in the White House, that that rhetoric would increase attacks on Asian Americans here, Asians in our country. I will tell you that Mike Pence took that very seriously. He did not use that lingo because he knew that it would lead to these types of hateful acts that we're still seeing in our country today.
Thank you.
Không đi tìm người yêu lý tưởng đâu anh, em không đi tìm người yêu tuyệt đối đâu anh, em không đi tìm người yêu nhan sắc mỹ miều, người yêu đai các cao sang, lụa lá gấm hoa vàng son. Em không đi tìm người yêu đôi trắng thay đen, em không đi tìm người yêu say đắm xa hoa, em không đi tìm người yêu cao quý ngọc ngà, lầu cao xe các anh ơi, có gì vẫn luôn vững bền. Anh ơi, em tìm người yêu chung thủy, em tìm người yêu trong mơ, dẫu nghèo nguyện không đổi lòng. Anh ơi, biết rằng ở đời ai không muốn đẹp giàu và cao sang, vì em nghèo đâu dám mơ. Anh ơi, em tìm người yêu không ước mơ cao, anh ơi em tìm người yêu thương mãi tranh xiêu. Mai đây cho dù rằng đời góc bế chân trời, cuộc đời bão táp phong ba, suốt đời có nhau bên mình. Không đi tìm người yêu lý tưởng đâu anh, em không đi tìm người yêu tuyệt đối đâu anh, em không đi tìm người yêu nhan sắc mỹ miều, người yêu đai các cao sang, lụa lá gấm hoa vàng son. Em không đi tìm người yêu đôi trắng thay đen, em không đi tìm người yêu say đắm xa hoa, em không đi tìm người yêu cao quý ngọc ngà, lầu cao xe các anh ơi, có gì vẫn luôn vững bền. Anh ơi, em tìm người yêu chung thủy, em tìm người yêu trong mơ, dẫu nghèo nguyện không đổi lòng. Anh ơi, biết rằng ở đời ai không muốn đẹp giàu và cao sang, vì em nghèo đâu dám mơ. Anh ơi, em tìm người yêu không ước mơ cao, anh ơi em tìm người yêu thương mái tranh xiêu. Mai đây cho dù rằng đời góc bế chân trời, cuộc đời bão táp phong ba, suốt đời có nhau bên mình. Mai đây cho dù rằng đời góc bế chân trời, cuộc đời bão